right, here we go. Here we go. Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations family. It's great to see everyone. It's me this evening. I'm just sliding in. There's so many things going on this side of things, and I'm just thankful that I have the opportunity to actually broadcast to the family today. It is Friday, it's Tri Vibes, and man, I gotta bring it. It's a storm going on outside, so I got my backup power thing set up. So, if something happens and you just see all the lights go off, don't think it's synchronicities based on my last sentence, but that there is a big storm outside, so it may take me a minute to hook up things, but we will continue to do what we do this evening, which is really, we're gonna definitely resynthesize ourselves, and we're going to just dive deep into who we are today, and we're going to do a little bit of recap. And today is actually our digest, so what that means is we're going to actually have some Q&A happening. We're going to get caught up on some of our type form questions for those that have asked questions on the metaphysical question and answer form, which I actually see is not used that often. So I always say your best questions come to you at times when you're just not put on the spot and not asked, hey, do you have any questions? So if you do have a question, grab a power tool like Evernote. It's free, a cloud-based note-taking tool, and put the question in Evernote. And then when you finally remember to jump on the type form and then send the question in, you can just copy and paste everything there. I'm here for you in this level of productivity, but just remember that no matter how powerful something is, it still really doesn't have power without you. And that's just the fact of this, meaning that, whatever untold thing it may be, whatever secret it may be, no matter how dynamic it could be, no matter how powerful it could be, if you personally cannot apply it, then in retrospect, it doesn't even exist, because you never get an opportunity to interface with it. You never get an opportunity to see that aspect of yourself. So just remember that. And we always get this started a certain way because I like to let it breathe. We're about 4 minutes after the hour. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it about 5 more minutes. And what that's going to do is allow anybody else who has also been coming off of a rather interesting day to settle into the space. Remember that you're here, and this is time to maximize and shine. Your Palo Santo and your sage is in order. So this is a good time to do that. If you are here and this is your first time, I always say, hey, just type a number 1 inside the chat box here. This is not broadcasting to YouTube also today. This is just us here. That's all we need. But it's important for me to know, who's just jumping in midstream, so that way I know how to ramp up this build, because I personally look to convey every single thing that it needs to be known all in this moment. So for whatever reason, Mom comes in and says, never again, you can't watch that no more, you still understand the truth and what you got to do and how powerful it is for you to make that leap of faith for yourself in life. So I'm Seven Bomar. I'm here in Costa Rica, Wholeness and Balanced Vibrations. That's how we get things started around here for a good round through the cosmos of wholeness. And there we go. And just like that, here we are. And it is that time and that space for us all to come together. So I'm going to go ahead and set these lines really briefly, and then we're going to get started in today's build with the first thing in order. And that is for sure touching and agreeing. This is really becoming that point for me where it's that continuous recollection in everything that is happening in life. I realize that, yes, to have the ability to study and to recognize and to come into tune with what the ancients were doing is an extreme gift, because people forgot all about it. There's so much going on in life. There are so many things happening. You can see it all around you. The minds are going wild. There's a lot of thinking and there's a lot of distraction. But because we have had this consistent connection and been able to come into the space at least once a week, it's like a cleansing ritual for us to come into the space and to level out and level into who we are. And wow, we've done this connection, I would say at least 20 or 30 times now. And what it's about, because I see there's some number 1s that are in here today, is it's about bearing witness that this is an immortal existence, that this does not end. This is not your final trip. There's more to you. And it's always great to actually sit in with the universal symbol of awareness, which our ancestors gave us, and that is the outstretched, raised hands and recognition of that immortality and the recognition of that power. And also, we know that from time to time that we can forget even who we are. In fact, that's what time is. It's like distance. And sometimes you forget where you came from. And in those states, you can often feel like something is missing. If that happens to you, I would only ask that you recall this moment when everything was present. And we're capable of doing that because those that have been able to turn their cameras on this evening and show us their faces and, more importantly, their frequencies have showed you that we have the entire cosmos right here. And with anything that works perpetually and infinitely, it can solve all issues. In fact, the solution exists before the problem. So I wanted to take time to acknowledge that space and also let everyone know that this is not the only space that is open. And also that in the past, I've actually gone into touching, connecting, and been completely catapulted into a whole level of awareness. And I just start going into the build. And I know some of y'all experience that too. And then sometimes my hands come down. And then about 5 or 6 minutes later, I realize, wow, how did the touch and connect end? Because I launched off. So giving thanks for you and giving respect for you and honor. And with that, we can always get this thing really, really pumped up because again, when I say sometimes it's just us, that's all we need. Like, we got to realize that even in this nucleus, really all you are all you need. And sometimes you just need to be reminded of that. So these are these reminders, right? These are the reflections of the reminders of why you would want to do this, right? So when you see other things around you, you could get very motivated by the things that are around you. It's very interesting to me because I find now that especially if you're doing something that is really base, that you still have to basically come into alignment with the laws of thermodynamics. And for those that don't know that term, I'm going to make you abreast of it as best as I can because I'm not professional to be some kind of nuclear engineer. But the laws of thermodynamics say that where energy is spent, generally there is not the same level of energy in return. There's a loss. So very easily, let's say, for instance, gas, the car uses about 40% of the power that comes from combustion, and the other 60% is lost. It's lost in fumes, exhaustion, sound, turbulence, many forms of restrictions. So that's where the power gets ate up. And this is, of course, why, some of the more efficient systems run on magnetics, and there's generally not a lot of sound. Because the sound is actually where the energy is, because that's accounted for. So just remember, in the laws of thermodynamics, you can account for where the energy was lost, but oftentimes, actually, according to their sciences, there is nothing that can run infinitely. Okay, now, of course, I beg to differ, but I will respect that anybody who has or anything that has the capability to break the laws of thermodynamics is on a whole nother level. Just that's how it is. So for you, how you have the opportunity to do that is because you can actually really gas yourself up, literally, off of your mind. You can believe something is about to go down or up, as we always say it. If it is like, I'm about to win the lottery tomorrow, or, not even something as base. My new book is almost done. Its publishing is going on Amazon tomorrow. The things that happen in your life that really are milestones for you. And you're like, man, this is it. I've reached this stage. And there's that level up inside of your consciousness. Now, remember, that's all still going on in your mind. There is some actions happening there for sure as confirmation. But your mind has the ability to basically create energy beyond the fuel systems that are normally in this sphere. But still, because we have to do many things in this world, like make money, work with our hands, that means that there's going to be some level of loss, right? And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get yourself into the most optimal position so that there is less and less loss of your energy. So, of course, in the beginning, though, that there's going to be hard work, just like a person who's lifting weights. They know I'm going to have to lift some heavy weight to get bigger here because that's the realm you're playing in. Very simply, if you notice how I can call it from the top down, the levels of command from the top down in your body will let you see the levels of power here on earth and in the cosmos. If you can ever get to the ability to, when you think something, it comes into manifestation and that's how you operate, then you are predominantly operating from this space. If you even, say that cold to where you can look at somebody and then they start doing what it is that you're telling them to do with your eyes, man, you're on point. And let alone what goes on here, I think we've lost all sense of, because this is where a lot of the senses are, we've lost all sense of what the sense can do. But we start right off at the mouth most of the time. Your boss is running his mouth and he's telling you what to do. And from that point on, I immediately jump to the arms because that's still, from the heart and all these other things. You get to the arms. The arms are the one that you generally have to do what the mouth says do. Hey, let's go get something to eat. All right. So the arms now are going to be the ones that are doing the work. So, but notice how as you keep going down the body until you finally get on the feet got the brunt of the load, right? Like they're just, they don't make none of the decisions really. You see what I mean? So even when you see your consciousness and you see how your consciousness is operating, you can also realize what's exactly happening in the reality. So yeah, when you try to accomplish, let's say, some type of financial gain, you would actually have to figure out where those energies at in the centers of the body. And then you would even see how low, if you may, you would have to go. Like, I got to go work in the mud now. I got to go work in the dirt now. I got to go work in the office now. Until you finally work your way up to a level to where, like, let's say in a corporation, the owners or the managers, they can say something and then everyone else does it. Now, the other thing is that corporations as themselves are extremely underestimated, even though it's one of the highest levels of metaphysical magic, period, to create a titan. The buildings that you see out there, those skyscrapers, that's why they're just replicating the things that were in the ancient times, like the ancient monoliths. That's their version of monolith. It's kind of like, what is that? Was that Danger Will Robinson and all that stuff? No, that was another one. But anyway, it was basically HAL. Okay, so HAL, and I think that was 2001, The Space Odyssey. They see this monolith right in the beginning. It's all cryptic, and there's these monkeys that are worshiping this monolith, and it's a specific shape. It's like a rectangular shape, and they even kind of bought it back again a few years ago, talking about they were finding them out in Nevada and things, right? But it's just a symbol that corporate office, that building, is the shape of the entity, and this entity should not be underestimated because it is a corp or a body that is put together that operates with several parts that still move like a machine and are able to get things done. And when you try to do that in your life with other people, it is something of any magnitude, you already start realizing how difficult something like that may be. Because if it just be two of you and it'd be a difficult, even if everybody's in accord, you got to, all these different things. You got to do the emails. You got to do the trash. You got to do the kids. You got to do every single thing. And it's just two of you. Let alone if it's 10 and then no one has that there's no glue. Nobody has that real blueprint to just come in and say, this is how you're going to work. You're going to stay in what you do good. Masters of communication also that know how not to piss anybody off, because everybody in this age is elated to the stage of a king and queen. Because you can have what you want most of the time. Anything that you could conceive, when you start focusing on it, you get it. So because of that, that also means there's an extreme, attitude. Sometimes ego, that if somebody's trying to tell you something, you immediately come into offense with it, right? So this is the playing field, really. And in looking at it, as I said before, you have to have some type of template. You got to have some type of compass to let you know where you're at from time to time, just in case you need to see this from another angle. Because sometimes when you're in comprehension about what's happening, you can get so caught up in just what's going on around you that you can get lost in that. As I said before, look at how there's ancient knowledge that was here, but nobody cares about that anymore because that is up here. That knowledge, that stuff about ancient knowledge and spirituality, all that stuff is up here. Right? So that's the energy that moves from up here. So let me show you something else. It's quite evident, period, the power of woman. I mean, I don't know how many people keep missing this and why. It's just in sheer, like, let's say, for instance, if you had to jump in every single day and you need to create some level of marketing, right? And you really got to do it. Maybe you work for Bell South or, Edison or some type of real corporation where they say, this is how much you need to come up with. And if you can't do it, we need to hire another firm. So they're masters of marketing, not just the guys who watched a few YouTube videos. And what they need to learn is they need to learn what people want. And as I said before, with our blueprint, we can already begin to, with our knowledge, determine what stage humanity and the consciousness is in by understanding the degrees of the things that they want. So watch this. So if I just had to create a picture only of something that would get the largest amount of response. All I had was pictures, no videos, no seconds, no nothing. That one moment, that one picture. What am I going to put in that picture? If it still somehow adapts to the brand, what am I going to put in that picture to get the largest amount of attention? And everybody knows, because you can see it on the internet, it's going to be a beautiful woman. You could put a truck there. You could put a Tesla Android. You could put a nice phone, and it slides about 50% right away. You could put even a man, the chest, the abs, the whole nine, whatever. What is it, Beckwith or whatever his name was? Michael Becker or something like that. But anyway, you could have the model, chiseled jaw, the whole nine, and if you put them side by side, what they call an A/B test, the woman's going to win every time. All right. So that's confirmed. Nobody should be arguing that. So let's say I have a business and it's not even adaptable. I can't even use women. So now you see, of course, why most corporations, they have to try to get it out. Like if they can, they try to tug that root chakra. But the next thing, notice how your chakras work. The next thing next is your stomach. And when you really think about it, the next most powerful advertisement, if it was a picture, is of some food. It's so all-pervasive. It's so saturated, you don't even think about it no more. It's just almost like we got so bombarded with food from, you watch them pour the food and the cheese. I saw this video. I didn't even watch it, but it was on the autoplay. And it was showing that when they film the soda with the water and the ice, when they film the burger flipping, they got these robots that hold these cameras and they're just following the burger flipping in the air and everything just to create this effect. So when they hit the bun, boom, and then the lettuce just boom, and then the water spray all over the place. This is that next thing. So imagine again, as a marketer, you're like, okay, well, I can't do the food. So now you got to go up to the next ladder. And literally what you're doing is you're climbing the ladder of the chakra centers. And this will kind of let you know the direction that things are going in right now, because they're going basically like down into the root chakra, because that's what people look for first. And then as you get to the top of the consciousness, man, are they really looking for that knowledge? Are they really looking for that higher power? These things are the least amount of priority because of really how a person is centered into their consciousness, okay? So that's very clear. So the next thing I want to do is, now that we've set that foreground, is I want to recap. Let me get some water in here. I want to recap on just what we went through last week, because this is the sovereignty run that we're doing right now. If you're just coming in here, you push the number 1, you got a treat for you, because inside the university, you can catch up on this. It's inside of sovereignty codices to be exact. And what we've done is we've gone on this process to really dial in. Actually, you know what? It did it to us. Like these days, it finds me. It's more of us here than just me. I've decided that, man, I have what it takes. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to observe the field. And when the field needs me to do something that's in line with the blueprint, I'm there. And I always know, because I have a million integers to go by of when something is in alignment. So I don't really get anything outside of alignment. Everything I see happen, no matter how wild and weird it may be, I still understand it's all in the alignment. And I marvel like someone solving a puzzle. If I can't figure out how, I marvel in how long it's going to take for me to figure out how it's a part of the alignment, right? So we have this connection, and it's been going on, and it will continue to go on, and it will never end. And it says, here's what's next. I mean, if you didn't get what I was telling you last time, I have no time to stop this. Hopefully you can get caught up on a bridge. And that's what we're here as ambassadors, that someone's reaching back to another person and reaching back to another person that's coming into this. And we're going to refine that a lot more. And that's the last part of my build today. But it's just that, as the prime mover is moving, the tip of the sun, we don't want that to stop, because that's already creating the newness. And then what we're doing is we're experiencing that until we get on the tip. And then what we want to do is we want to keep the broadband open, which is like, to me, just holding hands, to where even the person that's on the furthest end of the chain, in the hood, strung out, whatever the story, all oafed up, packed up, whatever the story, that there's still a hand to reach them and say, you know what, here's a way through you, not through somebody else. There's no brokers. This is like really the what they would say, the cryptocurrency of consciousness, in a sense to that is trustless. It doesn't take for you to trust what I'm saying. It takes only for you to look around you and to use the same integers that I'm using to give you a bit of a HUD or GUI over the reality. Just like a control or a module in which makes sense to you. Because the level of machinery and equipment and intelligences that we're dealing with, even if you could fathom what is going on within this consciousness, the mode in which communication would be on would vary. Some way of someone expressing exactly who they are and who their tribe is and their people and where they came from is going to vary from tribe to tribe. So you need a legend. That's what that's called. You need some type of legend. And then also, even in itself, a blueprint, an algorithm, or a system that is universal enough to where you can still expunge or extract these amazing gems and elements that are present in this space, because there's a lot of rare stuff. So rare, it's only one of them. You're so unique, there's only one of you. So the ultimate price is here because there's an ultimate value in something that rare. So give me a minute. Let me just grab some water, because I'm going to have to put something in this quantum warp drive so that we can get to it. Hold on. All right, we got some water on that fire. Okay. That ensures that the motors don't overheat. So here's our recap of our last sovereignty journey. Because as I was mentioning, sovereignty basically came to us and said, this version now. Because it's going to keep getting more and more clear. We're going to keep synthesizing this. But if you don't know basic addition and subtraction, I'm not trying to take you to calculus and trigonometry. It's going to make no sense to you. It's going to waste my time. It's going to waste your time. What we're interested in is in bridging. So that means that we must communicate in the language in which we speak. So as a recap to this sovereignty that's been dialing in, which is kind of coming across in a certain way, like, all right, there's a definition of sovereignty that everyone is using right now. It's becoming a buzzword. But as usual, no one has sat down for a moment and just took apart the word and seen if somebody else may have been using it in history and ultimately what it was related to. So we did that already, and we've discovered some amazing things for ourselves. And now, as our last build went, we talked about that in all of this, as the smoke clears, the most important thing is for you to have the wisdom that is important for you right now. We are dealing with a knowledge deluge. We are basically being deluged with knowledge. There's so much going on in the mind. Radio frequencies and broadbands, electrons have been completely harnessed. They were showing even today, right before I jumped into the build, Jeanette was watching something by Peter Forrester, who's, always examining these megaliths. And another guy that he has with him is inside of the temple of where they show where the electricity is. I'm pretty sure many are familiar with those. It looks like two bulbs with snakes going down them, and then they're plugged into a box. And they have this in one of the areas where the glyphs have been done. And it's, generally produced as proof that the ancestors knew and had electricity. But he was saying that his teacher, Kareem, said it's not always the image that you need to look at. It's what does the glyph say? And what the glyph basically says is that there's this power, and that this power basically people need to be careful with this power because it can be misused. And it was like basically a warning about, and it was electricity is what they were talking about. So obviously, us fast forwarding into the future, we can see that, yes, electricity has done amazing things, but it's definitely changed things. And those who use it for one way or another, and some of the things that it can conduct, like TV station, shows, certain materials, images, all those things that we've come to bear the account for that. So it's an extremely powerful element, electricity. But it's saying that in the glyph, like, hey, if you guys use this, you need to be aware what ultimately can happen with you if this is misused. So it says that right on the glyph. So my point is that when I was watching this, I was realizing again that because we have a lot of ancient knowledge and we have things that we already discovered, but even that is somewhat in the ruin-like stage, it makes us have to come to an awareness where we realize, man, I don't need all of the knowledge. I don't need a Google that is going to give me all of this information and give me even opposing opinions. If there's anything that I need of that kind of fashion, electronic information, basically, EI, then it needs to already be refined through some kind of system so that I don't get deluged by just how much it has to offer, right? And so we talked about too much knowledge versus the right knowledge and wisdom, and being able to actually convert knowledge into wisdom and to realize that there is something that you're working to get to here. We also talked about how, again, if you have only a certain amount of time every day as a person, a teacher is going to also be inundated with things to do. And that's going to put them in a position of not being able to learn. This is also even sometimes as a parent, you find yourself doing a lot of parenting, and whatever you were doing in life to continue your journey and knowledge and growth has to be put on hold. And you're about to learn the lesson about being a parent, right? So it's just that thing, though, to remember that there's sometimes a cause and effect of the life in this reality. And you always got to be able to be aware of certain things so that you can simulate. What I mean by that is if you're aware that, hey, I'm probably not going to end up having much time for myself as a teacher, because as a whole, teachers don't have time to really actually learn anything, then I need to change my structure of how I'm teaching so that how I'm teaching is what I've learned right at that point, maybe right in some type of increment or segment, like every 3 days or a week. Are there schools where people are teaching as they learn something? Of course not. Everybody in the school is supposed to know everything already. But we find that also creates a certain type of environment. We're not saying one is better than the other, but it creates a certain type of environment where everyone comes into that session expecting that the person that is teaching them knows it already. And this is highly dangerous because you'll oftentimes find people such as doctors thinking they know everything about something and then having to come back 5 or 6 years later and actually realize that they didn't know everything yet. So this is somewhat a new approach. It's not necessarily pyramidal. It's more horizontal in the effect that it's all of us going into something in the experience together. So that was another thing that I brought up in the sovereignty build is that means that one has to be flexible with coming back around again and explaining where they're enhancing. not necessarily changing, but enhancing what they knew to be the truth before. They're refining the truth. So we also talked about that speculation for a real master is something that is seen. I don't say it's avoided, but you know when you're deep into speculation. Speculation is like the drawing room for the next level of your projections. But if you live in speculation, it's something like my brother told me the other day. He was like, he's working on getting others to realize the difference between their imagination, which is, for them sometimes, especially when they're going to these Burning Mans and all these different things, and they just come back and like, oh, we're going to take over the world and we're going to be the powerful thing and blah, 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 and I'm going to have my own unicorns. You know what I mean? The difference between imagination versus a vision. And when you really, really dial into those two words, they can really seem like the same thing to the average being. It's like imagination and the vision. It's the same thing, right? But he was saying that there's a slight demarcation there, and that's where he found that demarcation, because the vision of someone who knows, yes, what they want to create is not yet manifested, but they're also very sound and very rooted into the principles of why those things should come about. And the energy that they're also tied into that gives them the drive to make that manifestation happen. So that could be your own unique sovereignty. That could be your children. That could be the world. You could have it vast like that. That could be for people in your demographic. Whatever the case is, this is the basically the design to one that is going to excel and one that is going to overcome. So speculation is the romanticized aspects of knowledge. And, another example is, when we can imagine other worlds and other, Andromeda, they go in, right? The Pleiades. And then they, this is what we were doing in Lemuria, and this is how it was designed. And what that is at times is speculation, because the real application, which is, as we talked about, that is the other priesthood, if you may, is direct application. It's going right to here are the chemicals that are needed to put that together. Here are the things that need to take place in order to make that happen in society at this time. Here are the elements, etc. So it's, let me show you. I'm going to take you in the laboratory, and instead of you visualizing how life is created, I'm going to actually bring the components of how life is created, the fluids, the proteins, etc., and we're going to create life right now. So there's a difference between the speculative knowledge versus the master knowledge. Another thing that we dived into was just about how, and this was a big one to me, it's something that I meditate on, especially when I see certain things going on, and this is just like a consistent meditation. It's just the awareness that first it starts off with a statement. If you think this world is bad, wait until you get a load of some of the others. If you think this world is bad, wait until you get a load of some of the others. And to not take it so far as if we're talking about other planets, but take it far enough to a great-great-grandfather who may have actually endured when the world is in some level of warfare. There's an energy to it, and it seeps through everything. It's like those first 3 months of the whole COVID thing when they really started really enforcing stuff and they shut stuff down. And then a lot of people who normally don't take anything serious started taking it serious. And then their frequency, it's like if air was moving, all of a sudden the air stopped moving. You know what I mean? It was like the window wasn't open anymore. And then the energy became very stagnant and dense, right? So that kind of energetic field. And so again, it's that awareness that only 3 generations ago, that world to a being that was there was quite catastrophic when dealing with warfare. Okay. So that's the entry point of this meditation. And then where the mind crescendos is realizing that all of what you're experiencing is to give you the awareness of how to return to the source. Your source is like your home. And the closer and closer that you get, the more refined and perfected the things are in your own life. You actually witness that, so you can bear witness to this. So thus, based on that, and also there's other phenomena like the higher you go in the air, the elements that are there are less dense. You can't put a heavy, dense element, mineral, rock in the air. It's just going to fall. So as things get closer to the top, they become more and more refined, more and more clear. So this just shows in several ways that even when the world gets as wicked and evil as some of the things that are reported to happen, even some of the planes that some people say exist, the hellish planes, they are only but further away from the source. And the further you get away from the source, just as if you were moving away from a light, your level of clarity of seeing, knowing what you're really seeing would decrease drastically, and to a point where it would be like, it would be chaos, is what they call chaos. So when you're choosing your direction at times, which you've learned through contrast, you can already know, well, I'm just going towards the more pure and refined things. There is a world where everything is indeed perfect. And perfect is exactly what I believe that it is. So there's a world in your own consciousness that you can live in based on the series of events that need to take place to let you know what life even is. So would you even know what a chair is if you've never seen a chair before? Would you know what fire is? Mainly, it's a trial by elements. It's about you coming into the awareness of the four elements and their power, so that way you can use the four elements for building your own world, right? So after this, you use the forces. You've learned how to breathe with air. You know the purpose of having ground or earth. You know the deal with fire, right? And you know the deal with water. And because you lived it, so you went through the initiation. So the initiation is taking place now. And that's going to answer one of the questions later on about these external initiations and rituals and all that. That's already being done by the ancestors by putting you inside of a body with elements and then taking you through the process of learning those elements and initiating you in that way. But there's a process going on here, and it never ends, as far as that you will keep progressing. So eventually you got to see yourself in the future like, I'm going to become a master of these four elements, and then eventually I'm going to be in like a lucid dream kind of phase, and then I'm just going to call in all the things that I enjoy from the experiences that I've had on quantum levels, and then I'm not going to dial in anything that I felt personally was not what I wanted to make a part of my projection. And then you would still understand, though, that in retrospect, beings that would have more of a vast state of consciousness would actually allow things in their projection that probably you wouldn't allow in yours. And that's already laid out even in the Gitas. Like, one of the gods came up to another god, why are you so powerful? And the god was like, because I can do things that, according to your deism, is not possible to do. So what that does is it gives me more expansion. It gives me more space, gives me more potential, more possibility. But also remember, we're in a minimalist now world. So we're realizing that even all the power, all the potential, all the strength, the possibility, everything is not always really what is more optimal. Right? So see, that's what I'm saying. It's like fools rush in. You need to have the opportunity to examine really both of these layers so you find that fine balance for you of how much of this is optimal for you, right, in the experience. So we also talked about how sovereignty means protection ultimately. Like when we just boil it into just what it is, just tell me what it is. The first sovereigns were present here when those terms began to be used because in the external level, people needed protection. The technology was metallurgy and smithery and blacksmithing. And there was some chemists, gunpowder, etc. And that level of magic, if you may, to the rest of the people was what kept them protected, because the kings had enlisted courts of what you would call priests, which were also alchemists that constantly investigated these elements to generally do, in most cases, what we are doing with that knowledge as a country or a nation of, let's say, America today, which is to find out how to create more weapons to get in advantage of another territory or another nation, right? So that's the external protection. But we found out that the internal protection is actually why there's those wholesome wise men And they're giving you this protection, not that as an amulet, but actually as a real talisman with man on the end of it, that they're telling you about you and this power and this ability you have, mainly to be able to see what happened before. And so thus you know what's going to happen next, because there is something circle-like that is going on with this realm. So it shows you that there's like these measures and these integers. And so through wisdom, you have this ability to really not only see what's going to happen, but actually position yourself to where it actually benefits you. So that's the real protection, if you may. Actually, that's the internal protection. And the reason why we roll with the internal first is we know that the internal begets the external. But we do have some folks that are headlong into the external and have become masters of external protection. Okay? We also dialed in very briefly to this ingenious system that the Nagas put together of knotting, which is in this case braiding DNA. And that while this hasn't at all been tapped into even by the conscious community, there's plenty of evidence that not only not tying, because there's a metaphor about a sailor, as we know in some of the linguistic books that we put together, such as or Pierre Sabak has also put together, and it's just referencing that there's an event that is being spoke of in the language, and this event is about a sailor arriving here to this planet with also a crew, and these crew being known as the angels, et cetera, and then they coming down on Mount Harmon. So we've used this knowledge that we've received, this wisdom, and also the metaphysical data set to verify that, to bring us into this awareness ultimately that these sacred knots that we're seeing on these temples, especially those that are within Angkor Wat, the area of the Tamil, South India, et cetera, that these temples always have these specific forms of Naga and also quite a bit of metamaterial or cymatics. And that what's ultimately being said, when you summarize it off, you can put it all together, like, what is this structure? We find that it is actually a generator, right? So if we look, so it's less obvious when you go to Egypt or Kemet, where you see the pyramids, right? Like, people are realizing something's going on with the pyramid, but they still, I'm not sure if if it gives them enough evidence that it's a generator. Versus when you go to Angkor Wat or you go to those temples in South India, what you see is you see that this is a machination of some type. This was functional before it became ruined, right? And when you read the function, you realize that the reason why there won't be really much external explanation, or because it's of an extraterrestrial nature, meaning this use of this is a metaphysical thing. It appears in a metaphysical world, and it's intact in a metaphysical world. And so again, in conclusion, these structures are themselves generators or birthing engines, if you may. And that would work very similar to if you could open up a portal between one space and another. So it's like a big vagina, if you may. And that's why the geometry even of the pyramids themselves is is that within itself. So why would someone build huge birthing portal holes, if you may, on the planet? Why would they do that? And that's kind of like common sense, because they would be bringing a bunch of people or a bunch of something from somewhere else. So it's like old technology, which is kind of way more advanced than what we're using now. Everybody wants to get somewhere. Old technology, this technology we're using now, everybody jump on a plane, they jump on the bus, we all go. Ancient technology, we all get inside of it, and we arrive at our destination. Some people call that UFO. They still are covering up continuously this knowledge, and that's called scaphology, right? I think Pierre Sabak enlightened us of that. It's the study of a ship or a boat, okay? So because now we know that our ancestors related everything about their travel, their time travel capabilities, et cetera, as ships and boats, then we can imagine ourselves as nautical engineers ourselves, or actually, maybe you didn't move up to nautical engineer yet. Maybe you're just deckhand. And the first thing deckhand needs to know is how to tie knots. And it's not just it's not just that knot that you know how to tie and tying your shoes and that basic knot that you have that you normally tie things with, because that knot will break. It cannot reinforce itself versus there's a lot of other knots, which I don't think you would have learned unless you went to Boys and Girls Club or Boys and Girls Boys and Girl Scouts, right? So unless you went to Boys and Girl Scouts, you wouldn't have known these knots. And even then, they're brought to you in the most basic way. These are knots that you need to learn how to tie that help you. They can anchor you if you're falling off a rock, etc. But in conclusion, those knots, because everything has power in these times. Everything the ancestors created had power and can be used in all sorts of ways. And so in conclusion, this knot is a symbol of knowing how to braid DNA. So it's not just the ability to open up a portal and bring multiple things through that portal. It's also an ability to bring through certain things and then use those things and combine them with other things and make other things. And if you really look at the temples closely, especially many of them, they even show you that they're doing that. And now here we are. You see what I mean? So speculation's over. We know exactly how it was done, but now we're here. Now what? And life continues. And that's always the interesting thing to me about vast consciousness is even when you go through the experience, your ayahuascas, your DMTs, whatever, you still land on the bus. I mean, you done went to a whole different planet in your consciousness. You're gone. And went and then came back. And then now you're here sitting next to your sister or your brother or somebody again on the bus or whatever. And it's humbling because it lets you know, hey, just because, you know, you figure that out, or just because you've seen that space before, or just because you talk to those beings, it does not negate this. So it's almost like even your parents saying, hey, yeah, enjoy yourself, but you still need to do your homework. And so here we are. That's why we come into the space. And so, of course, you know, this to me, as much as we want to make this a very family orientated space, and we're always bringing those kind of components in, because its origins is that of, well, we call it the university, but you can see it like the Library of Alexandria. I think that's people's last reference. It's a multidisciplinary, right? It's like on G.I. Gurdjieff's Meeting of Remarkable Men. It's that place that was set up to begin to teach you all of the avenues that it took to really understand consciousness if you wanted to be a connoisseur on life. Now, if you just want to breeze through, that's one thing. But if you want to be a connoisseur of your existence, then these are the things that our ancestors already put in place that say, hey, you can catch up. That's why I love books so much, because it's like somebody can spend years of their life investigating that. And that time, they don't get that time back. And here you come and you're able to inherit all of that. All of that 40 years, 50 years you get in that 2 or 3 months that it takes you to digest that work. So that's our quantum technology. That's our quantum solutions. And then lastly, of course, we talked about the metaphysical data set, which I'm seeing every day because it's not a new idea. It's been 2 years of dialing this in. But I just started off on such a big level of what I wanted to design and what I wanted to create. And even when we deploy Real Search, it was a part of that. It's just utilizing a more advanced search engine to move away the things that are not true, so that way what is the truth can become very clear. And for me, that has reached an ultimate crescendo point because I have run into a few very, very unique works, written works with interesting etymology, but I would still have to say that even though I've read those works and I know a lot about the code and I can cipher at any moment, it's still nothing like thousands of pages, because you won't really recall all of those things in every single book. If you feel like that's a bad thing, I don't know. But the reality is to have 8 books with 5 different languages and thousands of pages, and every single part of what's mentioned is in your mind. Like, I I don't know if we're there yet. Or if we need to be there, actually, because that's a lot to think about. Heavy is the head that wears the crown chakra, as we talked about. It's like there becomes a lot for you to deal with. So why everybody else is talking about the world and their little issues that they're dealing with here, you're like over somewhere completely different, realizing the experience that you either could be dealing with there or what's going on in that space. So at the end of the day, for me, to have it at the fingertips, that's what they call it. Knowledge at your fingertips. So to have spiritual knowledge at the fingertips until a point where I can create a cloud, because I wrote an article on this. I'm sure maybe everyone here has checked it out already. If you haven't, it's on Secret Energy. It was one of my first posts because I'm getting back into blogging again. That was my original claim to fame, and I do like to write more than I speak. But I'm just setting the alarm out that, hey, you know, how things are going with spiritual knowledge, awareness, and wisdom, it doesn't look like much time is being invested in that and is going to be invested in that because it's up here. It's over their heads. So we probably should do that so that way we can come to a conclusion that they may never even reach to the next 1,000 years. And summarize all of the knowledge and the wisdom that our ancestors have to give us, and then also create that it's just a search bar. So that way anyone that is also on that journey that needs that journey to be refined can also hit that and then get really the advanced knowledge until the wheel turns, okay? So now what I want to do, because today, believe it or not, it's not a monologue, is there's 2 parts to the rest of this connection that we're going to have today. Actually, there's 3 parts left, so we do need to push the gas a little bit. The first one is in relation. This is specifically to this, and I'm going to have the Sandman here. And for y'all not old enough to know the Sandman, when somebody would jump on stage and whatever they were talking about or whatever they were saying or whatever they were singing was not good enough and the audience started booing them, the Sandman would come and shoo them along. So hopefully you don't get Sandman, but I'm only asking for if there were any questions related to this, because there's a bit more that we need to go through today, but I didn't want to keep going off of our last sovereignty build without making sure we clear the space of any direct questions that are related to, in this case, the topics that I just recently discussed, the deluge of wisdom, teachers not having the ability to actually learn themselves and needing to simulate what exactly is happening so that they can get themselves into alignment, removing or at least putting in place speculation and realizing it's the romantic side of spiritual growth, and you need to understand master knowledge is make it actually happening and making it happening and know the energies that do, and the condition and the distance from the source being the real account of why we see hellish worlds and crazy things happening. But the truth of it, the matter is, the closer that we get into the perfection of ourselves and closer to the source, the clearer things will become. And then also the real definition of sovereignty, meaning protection, and how that can go 2 totally different ways. But it is a very serious thing to have the ability to protect you and others, and just having foreknowledge and the ability to see the future is the power that you have. And that's all based on seeing what others are doing. So you know, hey, you reap what you sow. This could happen again if these same things are repeated. And then are not to the DNA and realizing there is an ancient knowledge that is with the Nagas. We didn't talk about it that much, but just the ability to bring life does create also the ability to take life, but also that ability to know life and to really understand the variance of how life should be conducted into a plane, especially when you're transferring them from another space, seems to be more of what our ancestors were up to beside, I don't know, PlayStation, Game Boy, whatever it is today, Instagram, whatever. And then finally, the metaphysical data set that would keep us fresh in our consciousness if we need to have certain levels of knowledge that is indeed encrypted and hidden behind several different keywords. And so if you have a question, you can raise your hand, which is to push this button that's down here in the base of the chat. And Sean is going to answer that question, calling you in the order of that question. And once again, because there's 2 more parts of the build today, which is the Q&A from the Q&A from the type form questions, and then also this unveiling again of something brand new that we're going to be rolling out called the 4 Bridges to Sovereignty, and what's going to really refine a lot of things, especially going on in our communication, our chat, our roles, etc. And so I want to have enough time to bring that into the space, which will only take me 15 minutes. So it's 8 o'clock now. Let's see if I'm on the first page because I don't see any hands raised. I'm going to wait for it. All right. Okay, so I guess there's no breaks. Okay, so let's keep going then. I appreciate that. I'm glad that if anyone does have a question, they realize it probably will be answered by the time we're done. But if you do have questions and you didn't want to just go in right now, make sure that you do write it down, and maybe we'll save it for the end. So there was also something else. It had been lingering inside of the notes. It seems that I mentioned this before, but it also became relevant again, and something just said, yo, just do me a favor and mention this again. So I was like, all right, that's not a problem. 1, the most powerful energies are nothing without you. You are the link. So we need to realize very clearly the position that we're in with our power. Like nothing, even if something gets forgot and not remembered, it becomes nothing. So you got to exercise in your life the power of what you believe in. And when stuff is coming across and, they're just trying to get another subscriber to the groupthink, sometimes like, man, I still don't believe in this thing that's going around. The C word, like, I'm not there. It's for some reason, I can't even enter into the complex of the whole thing. It all seems so silly to me. It seems like, again, like an old novel where you can't find out who killed the butler, or what they call the butler did it. So it's just like this thing. And so it's not something that I'm going to adapt into my consciousness beyond the surface levels of how it affects me from time to time when I try to go up in somebody's spot without the thing on my face, right? Okay, so in that respect, I'm giving no power to that. So there's a fine line in this. I'm not telling you to be so cocky that you start thinking that nothing exists. You know what I mean? Like this is adepthood, right? So some can go completely off the deep end and be like, there is nothing. There is no rules. There is no structure. And then you catch them downtown LA 2 years later on a cardboard box and be like, man, what happened? It's like, I don't know. So there's a structure to this. So we want that balance between realizing what we would contribute energy to, because it creates creates our structure. It's what we're building on, versus what's not a part of our projection and what's so weak within itself, it cannot survive without us giving it some power. Okay? So that's that fine line. So that needed to be mentioned. Also, the double. I guess there was a few that are new here and the transmission needed to come back through again, or new to just this awareness. Maybe you missed it last time, but to remember, there is a double. There's another you. It has to be. It's all a product of how it's designed. It's nothing personal. It doesn't have to necessarily do with entities, spells, spirits, rituals, etc. It's about the design in itself. And because of this specific design, when you are created, another you is created. And this you, we call the double, and often functions somewhat like an antithesis to the situation. Meaning that in life, you could be destined for greatness and completely mess it all up. Because there is an anti-you that sometimes everything you say that you want to accomplish, it will tell you why you can't do it. Every action denotes a reaction from this thing, and vice versa. So when you're aware of that, you're able to simulate certain levels of awareness that give you growth. One of those levels is about personal things, personal success that's big for you, not mentioning that to everybody before it happens, because you're bragging about it. It's like, yeah, I'm about to go and I'm getting a car. I'm going to get this new job. They're going to call me on Monday. Then I'm going to get the car, and then we're going to hit the club. Yes. I call that eating it up. This means that every single thing that is needed to the energy that is left, that is needed to manifest what it is that you need to manifest, is already being eaten in your happiness and your joy, and you haven't received it yet. Likewise, a lot of times when you're telling a person something, their double seems to not like what you're telling them because they're still in this preservation phase of trying to figure out if you're going to be taking them to the club with you, or if you're going to get a new set of friends, or if you're going to go back across town with your boyfriend again, and they just go on this tangent, and it starts sending energy, or what they call arrows, at that projection until Monday comes around. You swear you got the thing, you even dress, and they say, hey, yes, Jennifer, unfortunately, we had a candidate come in, and he was just way better for the job. But listen, if we need you, we'll call you. See, and then you're like, wow, okay, the whole thing is cascading. And it's, again, here's another metaphor of that for those that may not like that one. It's just like a child. When a newborn child comes in, you can't really expose this newborn child to a lot of stuff. Especially, of course, even when during the conception, the mother's womb wasn't so strong. You're in such a sensitive phase, just a little thump could take you out of the game. So things that are very precious when they're in their infancy stages, you have a tendency to want to keep them hermetically sealed and away from all the germs and the bacteria, the things that are going on around it, until it has enough opportunity to actually fend for itself and to actually use those contrasts as benefits, right? So the awareness of the double gives you another heightened level of awareness of how to move. It's almost like they had another metaphor for this, and I'm going to see if I can explain this, and I'm done. It talks about how if you can imagine then the created worlds and that there's an actual creator, then you can imagine that the only way that you can keep perfecting the creation is you would need somewhat of an opponent. And this opponent would basically attempt to exploit the system. It's like the same thing that, let's say a corporation has this robust software and they got all these people in this software, but they need to protect everyone. So they have to do a hackathon, and they do these hackathons because they're basically offering rewards, 50,000, 100,000 for anybody that can hack their system. Now, this may be foreign to most people, especially those who don't believe that every success first starts with a failure. It may be foreign to them to actually try to get others to destroy what they have so they can figure out, if they start destroying it, how they were destroying it so that they can create a version that you cannot destroy. This is what our ancestors have us doing here now. That is one of the biggest missions, if you say, in the cosmos, is debugging destruction, ignorance, and stupidity and stuff like we're seeing right now. Don't expect to ever see this kind of thing again, because it's going to get debugged out. However it started, because this stuff starts thousands and thousands of years ago. So who knows? It could be as silly as a snail rolling on one side than the other. You just, you don't know. But there is all knower, right? There's a source where everybody's plugged in and all knowing. And in the all knowing phase, it's clear that you're debugging for the host, like the ones that are out, that are about. You're debugging for them all failures. So this awareness, it's very powerful, because in visualizing the opponent across the table, they say that. So as a creator, you just got to visualize this. As a creator, you have this opponent across the table, and you can imagine this opponent is in the hood. The face is dark. You can't even see the face. It's just like all darkness, right? Maybe there's even a reaver staff right there, and there's a chess game going on. But this being specifically, though, the opponent is blind. It's almost like, because you know the source code and the hacker doesn't know the source code or is not exposed to certain codes, it's like they're still blind as it's moving through your system. And while they think maybe that they're actually hacking it and that they're actually winning and that they're even turning it in the direction that they want it to go, they're blind to the fact that there's something that has got them doing all of that. And even when they have this recollection, maybe that's the case and they're still doing distortion, they actually think they're in some kind of competition with it and that they're even winning against it. And they don't even realize that this massive form of consciousness that is us is just letting any kind of exploitations happen so it can patch up that area and that can never be exploited again. And this is how you have to see your consciousness also in the development of your consciousness. But again, since this was a space that our ancestors used to create in, clearly, because we're here, just like this is even a maker space that I'm sitting in right now, I can't tell you how many things I've had to do over and over and over again, especially when you're messing with machinery and these kind of things. And the first one never comes out well. You just celebrate the first one because finally you got to that stage. But then there's this whole process where you got to keep calibrating and setting things. So what I'm saying is, what makes us believe that fact and fundamental about life would make it any different from the supreme and what the supreme has to also do? Nothing is exempt from this. The same rules and dynamics that we are being trained by is the same rules and dynamics in which our ancestors and the creators are using. So in that respect, it just puts us into an awareness that we have this opportunity to see in life that opposition is our refinement. And it's our ability to understand how we're being exploited. And ultimately, as we mentioned 2 sovereign sessions earlier, the mind becomes the vulnerability point. Right? So again, just so you understand, the mind is the most vulnerable component because the ears are, this is like left and right. So it's going to hear both opinions. And there's a vulnerability there. So if you don't have that mastermind where immediately it's like every idea gets pat down before it comes into your mind. And of course, we don't start like that. So this is deprogramming. Deprogramming is the process that we go through. So that way we can start getting back in control of our mind. And then we realize we're getting in control of our mind because even the mistakes that you made are all part of the process. That how the hell you're not going to make mistakes? The Supremes made mistakes. How are you coming in here not making mistakes? Who the hell are you? You wouldn't even be here. So do you see how in our minds, what we can think is how things go? I made a mistake. Now it's all over. Is like, what do you mean? Mistakes is how it begins. But you have to realize also the same space that you exist in and the things that you don't like the most are part of those things and processes of weaning out those mistakes. And we just have to be able to throw ourselves into the work because the excitement comes in. Nobody works well when they're depressed. The excitement comes in is the joy at the end of it, the paycheck, if you may. People work to get the check. We have to realize that even the work in itself has something to teach us, and that's what we're doing. So I'm going to keep moving through this. I'm going to answer some questions because, let me see what I could do with this time thing. Let me do something on this time. So that was the double, and just that awareness again of how we can create a whole advanced form of consciousness within ourselves by just coming into the awareness of some of the hard-coded factual integers about how we are put together. And then that leads to certain things. You reverse engineer those certain things, and then you come back with just the facts about how it's put together and how things work. And then at that point, you're able to use that knowledge, that beyond all of the other confusion to begin to refine what it is that you're looking for. So I'm going to start here with this question. It's from a number 2. Also, for those that are, again, just joining us, when you fill out the form, we actually do ask for your name. But in most cases, unless it's something direct that I know the person's asking about, I will not mention your name. I will actually just mention the enealogy number. So in this case, it's enealogy 2. That's the moon. And so we're going to begin with, this says, hi, Seven. I have 2 questions. I would appreciate an answer directly by you. What does that mean? Do I give indirect answers? Maybe I give indirect answers. All right, so here we go. I have absorbed all your lectures on YouTube, which led me down the rabbit hole of reading a book a week. And now I am part of the mentorship. I had 2 questions. 1, I follow someone who I consider an adept in ancient Nile spirituality. And a lot of what he says is different from your point of view. A lot of what you discuss, he considers as New Age, being tricked into fake spirituality. Do you consider what you teach New Age? And that is the question. So what I would consider that I teach is a version of the ancient knowledge adapted to 2021. And so from the offset, because I'm really, really driven more by unity than many other integers, it can look like that, oh, it's that same New Age message. But anyone giving themselves the time and the opportunity, if they're dialed in, like you're saying, they really have a different point of view, will actually see that our point of views are exactly the same. And then maybe in certain respects, they would connect something that maybe is not connected inside of their consciousness. Because I find at times the only difference that people find is something they disagree with, meaning some tribe, some group, some race, or some person that they don't feel fits into the storyline the way that I'm presenting things. So lastly, I will also say, anytime we come into someone that we feel has even at a depth level, if we're using that term, a depth level, we appreciate that knowledge. Because even if they don't have the same viewpoint, I'm interested in, so what is the master book that you've been reading that teaches you a lot about this? I'm interested in many different things that are going to allow me to grow spiritually myself. So I'm more for the one who is still on that adept path and may have found another vista, but I know for sure that we're going to be meeting up at a certain point, and what we say when we look at it from its core is the same thing. So that's my answer to that question. The next part of the question is, where is the line of what you teach and compared to the mainstream spirituality being released today that we should deem as not falsehood and real? Okay, so there was an additional part to that question, excuse me. So this says, or do you consider what you teach new age, or where is the line on what you teach compared to the mainstream spirituality being released today that we should deem as not falsehood and not real? And I would have to for sure say, when a person would say, I have absorbed all your lectures on YouTube, I would automatically assume you would know where that is, because we even talked about that today. It's the difference between the application of the knowledge and then the connection in with the original template to determine if this is just another, hey, here's this, what you should do to gain this. And then you find out you do that and it doesn't happen. So we deal with the real integers, the body, the consciousness, all those things. The last part of the question is, my second question is, I do like your wardrobe. I just am curious about the brand, so I can purchase and wear. What even corresponds to the color of the day. Thank you. All right, so I will tell you that, man, trolling Etsy these days, women, they have it lucky because they make clothes for women. There's not a place that I don't go. I'll be like, man, women have a large selection. Look, it'd be like 75%, maybe 80% of the store is all women's stuff. And then they got that 20%, they still got that shirt and the jeans for man, right? So finding things at times for men that is a bit more eclectic, but maybe not going too overboard for maybe how you're trying to project your energy, and something that kind of allows you to stay in custom so you don't really look like you're about to assassinate everybody up in the subway, is a little bit difficult. And I will say, though, when you spend the time, because I have to spend sometimes, I would see it as a waste of time almost, but your wardrobe is sometimes, important because it's how you're coming into this thing. I'll go to Etsy. Now, of course, Mom makes clothes too, and I've been trying to get her personally to link us up with some of those robes like Andrew be wearing around that he's gotten from different parts of the country. So that way we could begin to, concentrate that part of the culture, which is really lifestyle, right? So lifestyle, how you're dressing is really the right away. That's why, sometimes you can't omit anything. Life, it does demand a certain level out of you if you really want to get into this. And one of those things is about using everything to your advantage that you can to make your advent into the transformation of another that much more easier. So I'm not trying to make it hard for you to come into awareness of what I'm talking about, because you're being distracted by something else that is still like telling you, well, how could he even know anything if he's sitting over there with a shirt with holes all in it? So some people are at that stage. So, and then also, as I believe personally, many of us or all of us have come from very deep cultures, and our clothing is a big part of our culture. And so taking the time to at least dial into your culture and wear the things that are related to even the cultures that resonate with you. Maybe you resonate with Japan, you start wearing the kimono, this kind of thing. It gets you out of this standard, sometimes t-shirt or button down or jean frequency, right? But where are you going to find all that? I've been looking at Etsy, and it's been delivering things from time to time, and I trust that we'll be able to do more in the future. So that's what I got for you. The next question here is about Glenn Keely, and I didn't write the information down specifically of who it was, but they were asking about the Moho Mandan, and if I can elaborate on that a little bit more. And of course, that would be somewhat of a foreign topic for many. And this is just basically related to, there was a gentleman by the name of Glenn Keely, who's definitely risen into a greater state of consciousness. And he, I believe, was from Canada. I do remember he was from Canada. And he went in deep about stories about, different things that were taking place in Africa around the time where the patriarch was turned over, or the matriarch was turned over by the patriarch, but in this case, the patriarch with the capital P, which of course in this case would be the papacy, and also the Tsars that eventually went into Russia. Okay, so that's just a brief synopsis of what his information was about. But he kept mentioning that there was a priesthood that was a priestess. I guess you would call that it's a coven. Okay, that's the word we're looking for. And he would mention that there was this coven of the Moho Mandan priestesses. And mainly the main priestess was the most responsible person for even creating what we're seeing in the United States right now, that it was actually a priestess. So he asked me, was there any more information about this anywhere in this question? And so my answer to that question is, you would lose the trail of the Moho Mandan priestesses at the name, because that name, while very accurate, is not a name that you will find cross-referenced anywhere on the internet, which, once again, I think in certain ways authenticated a lot of Glenn Keely's knowledge, because somehow he was coming up with this knowledge that it was accurate, and he would even have deeper names, but no one had found that information on the internet. So there was like no source. Okay. So obviously I digested the work, because I think personally, maybe I was one of the first people to really tap into his whole voluminous work. He has a couple videos on YouTube, but he was writing this stuff on a website, and his website looked somewhat like Dan Winter's website. It was just like text all over the place and everywhere, and you couldn't even really copy and paste the text and get it all in the right order. It was that wild. So it took some time to go through that. So I would highlight chunks of it and paste it into a document, and then put it all into a reader and just listen. And so I can summarize this then, since the question is directly about the Moho Mandan priestesses, I can summarize this as being bat coal. Okay, so let's just, again, I have to answer the question. So let's just look here very briefly. Also, I will say that, if there's some kids in the room, I think this would be the time to where, this is where you will have to kind of like adjust the volume levels, just because the question is here. I have to answer the question, but it does get into adult stuff. Okay, so let's just go here very briefly. I'm not going to turn my screen capture on until you've done what you need to do on that side of things. And in the meantime, what I'm going to say is that, so what I do is a lot of people have this dualistic opinion about everything, and it's melting down humanity. And what I like to do now is come into a master level of awareness to where I can see the silver line on everything, and I can purify whatever was desecrated, because everything always starts as, let's say, this purified state, and then it starts working its way down from there. Okay, and we've already explained that. So let's look very briefly here, as we're making our transition, to Madame Blavatsky, who was, of course, very instrumental in bringing about the Theosophical Society, which we know later on became the OTO, or the Golden Dawn, which sits as the spiritual arm to Freemasonry today. We also know that Madame Blavatsky had as her, you could say, respective magicians, MacGregor Mathers, who wrote the Testament, or the Keys to Solomon, and also the Kabbalah Unveiled. And then also Aleister Crowley, whose reputation speaks for itself. Even deeper, we know that Eminem, or Marshall Mathers, is actually the grandson of the magician or high magician McGregor Mathers. Okay. So we have a book by Madame Blavatsky, which she claims as her highest work, which is The Isis Unveiled. Geez, the brain is incredible, right? It's like, geez, like I could just, it takes a minute, but it's still there. So Isis Unveiled, right? Or the Isis Papers, excuse me. So Isis Papers or Isis Unveiled. No, Isis Papers, excuse me. Isis Papers belongs to somebody else. So it's Isis Unveiled, I believe it is. So she starts off writing the book, and she mentions that the dedication to this entire work is to Bat Call. And because there was no reference to Bat Call also anywhere else on the internet, this created that same kind of phenomena with Glenn, which is what Glenn Keely did. But fortunately enough, this name is able to be traced because it does actually break down in etymology to something specifically. But I just want you to understand that the introduction to Bat Call again into the world was done by, oh, actually here's a reference to the code of the Matrix, and I mentioned it in there. There's a full circle. So what's here is that it's just that you have to know that the Mohammedan priestesses that Glenn Keely is talking about is under the coven of Bat Call. All right. So this is all secretive stuff because remember in the forest, basically, as I call it, so when you have children, you take your children to the hospital to have them, and then they identify those children and they get certification, they get papers and everything. But in covens, children are born, and those children are the law, the system, the state, the country never knows those children were born because they never leave the coven. So it's standard to us to think that everybody goes to the hospital to birth, but we even have probably some that have had home births and are still like wondering if they should put this baby in the system. It becomes a much more difficult life for sure, just, ducking around all of what goes on. But there are many people who don't have their children in the system. So let's just imagine in certain countries, though, it's even less overwatch on this kind of thing. So we have lots of kids being born that they're not necessarily registered in the system, or there's no awareness that those children are born. Okay. So in the covens of Bat Call, that's really where they're calling from. I guess that would be the term. That's where they would raise more coven priestesses, okay? So now, as we're aware of that, if you wanted to get this today, like in I don't know when the movie came out, but in the speak of how people communicate today through movies, you would actually find this coven of Bat Call. And they don't mention the names, but when you know what you're looking at, you know what they're talking about, right? Because there's always an initiation going on. And it turns out that Vin Diesel's initiation happened to play out. And let me just a second here. Okay, I think my thing may have froze for a minute. So Vin Diesel's initiation happened to play out inside of a movie known as Babylon AD. Okay, so this automatically explains, again, in entering Babylon, we're talking about Sumerian stuff, which at the end of the day, when we look at the OTO and what they call the Cthulhu or Cthulhu, and they worship these elder gods, etc., some of them being vampire squid, etc., and this is their whole theo or mythos in which they got from Lovecraft, right? Which was actually all of Lovecraft's work, which was admitted later, especially by Paschal Bishop Randolph. Bishop Randolph was basically Lovecraftian works were racist works. It was kind of like the same thing that Albert Pike got into. And we realized why that would all play out, because underneath everything, there's this war going on with the Nagas, right? So in this respect, just to stay focused on this, Vin Diesel's initiation takes place in this movie called Babylon AD, in which his responsibility is to take this woman from a coven where she's never seen any part of the world, and from these old women to another coven inside the United States. And he needs to protect her through that process because they are setting out to kill her for, numerous amount of reasons. Okay. So if we just rewind here, we see that or look closely here, we see that Vin Diesel has on his neck the seal of the Necronomicon, or the seal of Marduk, which is several imperfect pentagrams. And then we find other symbolism within the movie showing that, again, the ritual is actually being done and taking place. So that's just the modern reference to, okay, can I back this up anywhere to see somewhere else maybe that there is, in fact, this coven. And so that's what they're showing in the movie. So now we would only then need to go to the metaphysical data set to find the rest of the story. So that way we're not leaning upon our own understanding, but the understanding of the scholars that have deciphered the work. Okay, so let's bring this in our own fashion, but in conclusion, this is saying the Allied, well, we're going to start here. I'll fast forward that because it's a little X-rated, but it's saying it's basically necrosexual magic. And we talked about this before, that Seth had this thing going on with women and magic and sexual magic, and that also made up the cult of Set. And because, or Set also Osiris, sometimes called Set Osiris. Also, we know that those Syrian mysteries are really what the OTO is bringing across. And then we know that has a lot to do with Orion. And then the whole thing just kind of cascades from there as being, definitely not something that every time we see someone going in, that they come out unscathed. So we're only saying, we cannot say exactly what's going on in there, because I would think it would be a horror to practice something that others come out quite distorted. So we know that inside of these secret societies that are involved in Freemasonry, that this is the kind of magic that they practice. So let's verify that. Okay. Now, does this bear exact resemblance to what the original was? No, because the original of anything is sitting in a pure state. Once it becomes corrupted, it's now inverted. So then, if we know that, we can also see what the pure state is. We would basically be able to understand the true daughters and what their purpose was. But we would, unfortunately, these days have to look at it through the corruption of the priestess craft. Okay? So we have here, it's a mention that necrosexual magic. Isis is depicted as restoring Osiris's penis. The imagery is probably Coptic and works as a pun on the sarcophagus, a Greek sarphagus, which means flesh eating, connoting intercourse, linking thematically to death and then to rebirth. Okay, so this is the corruption. The core virgin priestess is an intermediary sanctioned genetically through her menstrual blood, the fire star. The onset of the oracle's period is referred to as Bath Kol, the daughter of the voice, attributed to the virgin's call. The first traces of this pubescent blood, in Latin, the macula, literally the spot, refers to a masca, a type of witch. Her menstruation blood, the macula, is cultic of the red serum and describes the immaculate conception. So from here, we now need to wean out the corruption from the purified. So the corruption obviously is, yes, that what we see now that is predominantly being used, especially in the arts of the OTO, and what even Aleister Crowley brought forth himself, was a dark tantra that involved and fed into things like what was mentioned with the Grail Queens and the Grail Kings, which is the Magdalena, or the initiations of Magdalena, or mag in this case being menstrual fluid, which also in this case means that menstrual fluid is magnetic. More importantly, what it's saying is that there's a macula, or literally a pubescent menstrual fluid that contains some type of initiatory energy called the fire star. And so if we're imagining this in an environment where women are in a sanctum, kind of like the Amazons, then you can kind of see how women would be brought through a process of an awareness of themselves through that first menstruation cycle, which still remotely takes place today with women in their with the mother and her daughter, where she has to now explain to her what this is all about. But if you can imagine on a much deeper level, it's a lot more deeper with when you're now finally able to bring life. Now, the corrupted side of this is that because this specific cult that we're referring to with OTO are fascinated with death and the energy of death, they celebrate the menstrual cycle as an actual barren time. So according to the theism, that when the woman is in her cycle, in the period of her cycle, she's not capable of being impregnated. And the actual menstrual fluid itself is the aborted fetus or the egg, right? So in this case, they are worshiping that aspect of it and removing the sacred aspects of this transition point where the woman now goes into the level of being able to sustain and support life. So then, because if we look into these ancient texts, which I don't have in front of me, but I was reading the other day, and it was just a prayer to the ancient mother inside of Egypt. And they were just saying in a nutshell that this ability to bring life into a world is really, really difficult. It is a very, very, very high level of power. And they kind of recognized already that their power was not on the same level as that at all. So they always gave reverence to this ancient mother because she can bring beings through portals. And we've talked about this before, that we see these external structures in many ways as external portals. You know, if you build a pyramid and then you bring souls through it, it's almost like, well, a woman can bring a soul through. Why would you use a building versus a woman? So again, that would be schisms in the priesthood, to be honest. This is why you get a lot of, as it keeps continue to mention, and let's keep reading it, the monthly cycle of the priestess alludes to the mammal in conjunction with the red goat. The whole thing with goats, I think that at this point, because we've had so much of this symbolism of this demonic goat thing, we don't really see how it, for middle class, we can say the middle class ancients, the goat in itself was the way, it's like how you survived. See, managing cows in larger mammals is difficult. So even the lamb and the goat are virtually synonymous with each other. They're very similar. But you'll notice that it's weird because when you even see the difference between the Arab and the Israelis, it's like the difference between a lamb and a goat, even genetically. And, you know, maybe we'll save that story for later. But there definitely seems to be a part of history where the copulation or the energetic mixing with certain animals that are on the planet seem to actually create certain tribes. And we've talked about that before. It may seem, uncomfortable now, but we've gone into it deeper. So what this is mentioning is clearly this is like from that bloodline. It is this bloodline specifically that is practicing these rituals. So it goes on and says the practitioner of the night then. So we know that Madame Blavatsky was talking about Bat Kol, and we know that she was talking about basically a witch or a practitioner of the night. We know that these practitioners have an awareness of sex magic, and this sex magic also involves virgin priestesses, like we see on Conan, which is CNN. We see Conan, the Conan #1, where he's trying to get this priestess to this other area. Now that's the same thing that's playing out in Babylon AD with Vin Diesel. He's trying to get this priestess who's pure to another level or to another area, right? So again, Conan #1, if you watch that again, or the one with James Earl Jones, that also lays out this same thing. Except for Conan and James Earl Jones in real life are really on the same side. So as it goes on, it says, then Bat Kol is the bride of Saturn or Satan, dressed in black. She is presented as a sorceress and a prostitute to the Dark Lord. Her offerings are conducted inside the inner sanctum and the temple in alignment to the resurrection of the serum. Historically, the stained skin of the goat is hung in a Jewish tabernacle. Later, the temple sanctuary. Right. So again, this rite, as we're seeing, is still being practiced within this culture, but it has lost all of its purity. And then now it is now brought up the energy, and this is why we see this in the world now, and that's the energy of more of the priestess or the goddess being used from a prostitution level versus as the creative component and power that is free, right? So then it goes forward because this is still a coven, and as was mentioned by Pierre Sabak, that Saturn, and as I talked about before, Saturn is more of like a Mrs. Doubtfire. He mentions that Saturn is more of like what we would say today in modern terms is more like a dyke. So it's more of like a very strong masculinated female energy. And then that strong masculated female energy is the head of the coven. So it's important to be very clear about this because it technically inside the coven, no males are allowed unless they become eunuchs, which is the priestcraft of Osiris. The symbolism is Osiris is missing his generative component. He has no penis. So it's the same thing that you would find in the ancient setting where anyone that was to be around inside of the harem, that was a servant inside of the harem, that was a male, had to be an eunuch or castrated to make sure that this eunuch never slept with any other women and actually produced offspring with the women, okay? So the only males then that are allowed inside the priestcraft of Satan, believe it or not, because we're seeing all these males at times in the whole Satan thing that the U.S. is doing, but Satanism is actually more of a matriarchal thing. So behind it, or veiled, which is what you see in Islam, the feminine force is veiled. So that's why the book of Madame Blavatsky is Isis Unveiled, right? To take the veil off of this mystery of what is going on. So finally, it mentions masquerading as an eunuch. The serum is clothed in human form, cryptically a red goat skin. Now, this is loaded because it's basically saying that. So now there's a kind of another energy that's moving around that is kind of inside of the female coven, pretending as if it's an eunuch or that it cannot produce offspring, but it can. And then it goes on, it says this is duplicated as the Aryan priest. The hide of the goat is a motif of transfiguration, the mammalian ministration. So what this is saying also cryptically is that, that's what I'm saying, you can't take this stuff for face value. Cryptically, what it's saying is, so you think that these priests, the popes, etc., are the heads of the priesthood, the Aryan priesthood, you can say, which is what the OTO was all about, the Great White Lodge. But really, behind that is really the coven of Bat Kol. Okay, so that is, in conclusion, the Mohammedan priestess, if you may, as a terminology, and their work that they are continuously doing to shape as much as possible the future of humanity through institutions such as one, Planned Parenthood, which is owned by George Bush's father, and the ethics that have come through Planned Parenthood and the fetuses that they achieve from when they get them from women who are aborting their fetuses. So all those fetuses are taken and different things are done with those fetuses. Somebody was saying at minimum it's makeup. But on the other level, there's a massive thing that has been going on Earth with that level of energetics in this pure energy, and it has been corrupted completely, and now it is in institutional hands, and that is a part of the culture and what they're doing now, okay? So I think that was the most proficient to date explanation of what would be the Mohammedan priestess and what would be the cult of Bat Kol and what Madame Blavatsky, Kut Humi, Master Moria, and Saint Germain, and Melchizedek, and McGregor Mathers. And see, this is like the usual suspects to me. So all of their pictures are on a board and with string lining out one from the other. Jack Parsons, President Nixon, all of that network of darkness, which plays on the other side of the table of the master, but is master creator and is blind to the overall process that we need to take this entire space through so that none of this that is distorted and unrefined ever happens again. It's a way of how we are preserving things or need to learn, a way of how we're learning to truly preserve ourselves, right? Which is that protection. So the next question is, in a nutshell, it's about trace minerals. So that's how you got to be a multidisciplinary, because so we got to go from that to trace minerals. The question is, if there was a question about the Utah trace minerals, and that's what they have been using to mineralize the water. And they found a video, this is number 6, found a video that I talked about not using Utah's trace minerals. And so they're asking, if not Utah, then who? And so I always like to update my relationship with water. And I will say I got to speed this up if I'm going to. Okay, so let me speed this up. So trace minerals in the water, I'm just looking at the time like, okay, we still got one more part of this. And I guess I'll just kind of fast forward through that, and that'll get us out of here by 9 o'clock. So trace minerals from Utah is a no-no. It's a big money racket. They've been doing it for a long time. The places are dirty. You will drink this stuff and you will even get sores, which minerals will do anyway, actually, to be honest. It's not so much as you get sores in your mouth and in your throat from just drinking minerals at that. It's all about the concentration, right? But these minerals specifically are contaminated. So I would not buy minerals from Utah Trace Minerals, which is the biggest mineral dealer, okay? So where to get them from? We've talked about cell food, okay? We've talked about certain systems. The one I'm using now is called, one second. It has an odd name. It's called Frizz Life. It's actually on Amazon. And the reason why I'm using this now is because, one, I know the filters are high quality. And two, I can monitor what's going on with the condition of the water from a ppm level. And three, it's really easy to replace the filters versus that big boy with the 90 stage filter, like 90 stage filter for $300 on Amazon. The way that it's built, once it's over, it's over. So it's like you get about 3 to 8 months, depending upon how dirty the water is, of usage of that. And then it's best to just kind of throw all that away. So you've kind of like, it's not as efficient as it should be. So this one, I definitely did my own research for a bit of time, a couple weeks, because I was going to replace the units, and that's what I came up with. And then beyond that, you have all sorts of minerals, like you have shilajit, right? So that's a mineral. You can always, if you can find a spring, remember the rocks is minerals. And then the latest and greatest is diatomaceous earth, zeolite. Because the mineral sets, just a little bit of that, because you can come out with a hell of a stomachache. He was like, this tastes like nothing. Oh. And, that may prevent you from going at it again. But keeping that coral-based, mineral base inside of your system, you'll know when you're regenerating bone, when your nails are growing a little faster. And I think women pay a little bit more attention to their nails. But if you're seeing your nail, you'll notice if you really have something that is giving, and you're getting the right kind of mineral intake, your nails will be growing faster. And then, of course, you'll see your hair, but mainly focus on your nails, because that's going to be something that's like, always like, oh my goodness, I'm cutting my nails every 3 days. That's when you finally got to that level with your body that what you're administering from a mineral level, at least the level, the calcium and the calcium breakdown is being done properly. Lastly, I do want to mention once again, hombre grande. That's what they call it here. Let me just give you the name of it. I think it's cassia. No, it's not cassia like the plant, but let me just give it to you real quick. And this is just because pound for pound, Quassia amara, pound for pound, a one size fits all. Like, I'm not really a big supplement person, to be honest. Like, I kind of don't like taking a lot of things. It's just, for me, it's not even like, I just don't. It's not even like I have a problem with it. I just forget. And so a lot of times, I kind of come back around and I'll be like, man, my condition, I need to get myself back together and get back on my dean. And generally that means I need to get back on my supplements. And what I found, though, is that from a lot of the damage that we do, it's falling onto the liver right now. And I always saw bitters in some of the work of some of the masters that I've been around. Bitters was like their go-to thing. Like they were always just working with bitters. And it kind of makes sense that, most of the time things that are really sweet are kind of bad for you. I mean, you can get a little bit of it, but it's never that you can get a bunch of sweet stuff and everything's going to go well with you. So that kind of also means on the other end, you probably need to have more bitter things. And we come to find out that that's true. So Quassia amara is actually also known as bitter ash and bitter wood. And there's a normalized version, or what do they call that? What do they call that? Oh my goodness, what is the term? It basically means when they bring this into like a laboratory and then they give you exactly what the administration amount is. But this is so common. It's also common here in Costa Rica. You generally find this at markets sometimes just wrapped up in newspaper, and they pass that to you. And when people have all sorts of situations, they give them this. So I wanted to make sure that I put everyone onto this, even though it has nothing directly to do with, and that's Quassia amara. And the big crash with Quassia amara for the medical industry is that it is super cheap. So there's really no money in it at all. And this bitter, like, read just the Wikipedia entry, and they like to lie, and they even had to bear witness to the truth. And let me just pull that real quick. Oh, there it is right there. Quassia amara. I could cipher that all day. Sounds good to me. There it is. So you can read that, and if you go to the bottom, you'll see diabetes, back spasms. And, the tip on this insecticide, it also scalp problems. It's anti-leukemic. Okay. And the tip on this came from, so this was like in the heat of the whole thing when C had broke out and everybody was in terror. Right. And I had some folks at our house, and, it was a little bit more than normal. And the conversation was struck about the situation and what to do about it. One person was like, what should I do about it if something happens to me? And that started buzzing. And another person, and I'm not mentioning names here, but another person was like, let me call X or text X, because X knows everything about everything in the jungle. So they text X, email back right away, text back right away. Anything to do with C, Quassia amara or hombre grande. There's nothing that can fade the big man. And the indigenous knew it, the ancients knew it, and it still arrives today. It even talks about, it takes weight from the ovary and the uterus. It also decreases estrogen levels. So you see, this is like, there's several things that this is doing. It's not like just one thing. So very seldom do we find one thing that is able to address so many things. Okay, so let me keep going because we got to get out of here today. So, so I was at questions. Okay, so we're going to speed through this. There was another question from a number 4, and it asked about LBR, the lesser banishing ritual, or the banishing rituals, and if they're good or not, right? So they wanted me to weigh in, good or bad. I will say this, because I try to transcend good or bad. Now, some know about this, but there's these banishing rituals that are done inside of magic, and they're supposed to be either to open up or to close the space. And many are asking, or this question is asking me directly, what do I feel about that? What I feel about it personally, as my personal opinion, is, first of all, these rituals specifically, and the lesser banishing ritual, is magic with a K, which has been brought to everybody through the OTO and the Golden Dawn, and their incessant literature writing and introduction to these rituals that they say are ancient rituals. So right away, for me and them, they get no trust. Now, I feel like some people may have been doing these rituals for lifetimes. Like, let's say, for instance, if in Islam, they bow down 5 times a day, so you learn to call the Adhan. You learn how to say that prayer, which opens up a portal. They say Al-Fatiha touches the roof of your mouth. Your tongue touches the roof of your mouth 19 times, and it's supposed to open up a gate into the top of your head, right? So there's a ritual going on with this. The person mentioned, and I only short scripted their question, that when they do one, things is cool, but when they do the other one, whether they're banishing or whether they're opening, when they do the other one, which actually oddly was the closing one, that they at times feel like other energies are around them and, things are going on. They also have nightmares when this stuff happens. So in the end of the day, we need to understand, why are we doing these things? And what are we dealing with? And that's what I've taught everybody from day one. If you don't do this, it's not going to make it so you never get the level of awareness that you need to have in existence. So then you need to ask yourself, why are you doing it then? And that to me is across the board for anything. It's like, if I'm going to practice some ritual, I need to understand that. So when you're calling these angels and then you're calling the tetragram externally to be around you, which is what this does and what it talks about, calls these angels on the four corners, all this kind of stuff. You need to understand, what are you doing with all of that? And if that's giving you such an advantage over life that someone else does not have, or is it dialing you into something that is basically allowing you to become vulnerable and resonate with something that is more of the hidden side of the occult world and the magic that's being placed on others in the reality, and you've just gone up 1 degree in a big ass pyramid that is sitting on top of you. So that's what I would say about the lesser banishing rituals and the banishing rituals and whether they should be practiced. There is another question here in this. Is there any way, and this is now leads and finally segues to the last part of the bill today, is there any way to gauge how far I have gone? That was that question. And then the next question is, will there be classes for ambassadors to fit into a role? Okay. So these questions I felt were very similar, and they actually allow me to segue into the final part of what I wanted to introduce today, because I see, again, we're at that stage of growth, and it's time to re-optimize our communication and the way in which we're interacting inside of our chats. And the tool that we have there, which is actually beyond a chat, it's Geneva. And this is now rolling us into the introduction of us now beginning to utilize, as I've mentioned a little bit before, the 4 elements. And give me one quick moment here. I just need to download something real quick here that I'm going to show, and that's going to just give me a quick guide. In fact, actually, you know what? I'm not even going to use that one. I'm going to use the written one. I've started creating a chart around this. This is something that we're deploying ASAP. It's one of those things that I call our blinking red. And it's just because we want everyone as much as possible to keep expanding inside of the tribe. We don't want to see any contraction. And so we realize that a large part of that is our responsibility, because we are the ones who design the system that everyone is using to communicate. So productivity, though, is not something that can be invented. Productivity goes by specific dynamics, and when you're utilizing those dynamics, then you see productivity. And when you're not, you start seeing stagnancy. And we also mentioned that there's something interesting that also goes on in life, and that's just that nothing remains the same. So we always have to come back in and redesign certain things or enhance certain things to fit where we are now. A good example of that was when we first started the first site, I used to spend a lot of time in the chat connecting with everyone. And it seemed to be very healthy for the site. And it seems that we reached, this was with when we were just the resistance then. And it seems like we peaked at a certain point, reached like 200 and something members. And I could start noticing that, in the times that I wasn't in the chat, that the chat would be bustling. It was there's a lot of connection, things are happening. And then when I would come into the chat, it would be like, there would be like a slowdown, and then there would be nobody talking. And then I started to realize that there was a transition taking place, and I needed to respect that transition and adjust accordingly. And this transition was, in the beginning, everybody needed to know that I was there and that there was something here. There was a foundation. It's like a father of the home. But later, everyone else just wanted to connect and interact with themselves and not feel so much like there was even somebody watching them. It's kind of like how kids, they like to play, but maybe they don't play the same when the parents are around, right? So this was a completely opposite scenario. So I had to know when that was taking place, and then also know when it was time to step back, right? So that's just the mindful adjustments that we're constantly making here, not for just our own benefit, but also the growth of everyone else, even if it means that, hey, we need to kind of pull back on something a bit or rearrange something or change something. So where we're at now is we're realizing that the onboarding process to Secret Energy must be complete. To Sovereignty Mentorship, it must be complete. We're almost there, but we're not completely there yet. This onboarding process has a lot to do with every time there's a new person that comes in or an existing member that they get to the conclusion of what it is that they were looking for first. It's like a personal selfishness sometimes that when a person comes in, they're looking for X. And if they don't get whatever that is, then that's definitely going to be a lower retention because they're going to leave. They're going to move on. They're going to try to find that somewhere else. And it just so happens that also when people come into growth, there are things around them, we can just say the doubles, that don't want them to grow. So if there's something that could trigger them right away that they could see that could kind of make them go back on this commitment to learn more about self, then somehow it'll be the next text that somebody else is texting inside of the chat, especially if they're off balance just a little bit, right? So we find this behind the scenes situation that may be not allowing as many connections that could be made to be made, right? So I sat down about this with myself, and I came to the conclusion that we needed to start groups. And we also even brought this into another session with the co-creators, and we discussed this. So we synthesized this, and we realized that the 9 is great. Enealogy is perfect for dealing with many of the unique aspects of how we function. But to onboard to the 9, which is possible, we did it, is probably still not going to be as smooth as onboarding to the 4. And in this case, it's onboarding to the 4 elements: air, fire, earth, water, because we've already had sessions showing how that connected into the personality of the person. But when you got into enealogy, you got a further breakdown. So this is like a core onboarding process that starts off with what we're calling the 4 elements. And then there's a 5th element, but we're going to actually organize that within groups. And we're going to actually create a flow within each group that is actually different in each group, but is actually more catered toward what should be accomplished respectively within that group. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit and briefly about just how I see things to what we can handle here. Now, I will say for the record, I've always talked about when you try to get one thing to do everything, you may run into some issues because a lot of things are not designed to do everything. So we try to do as much as we can, but we also try to be aware of what is beyond what we can do. So scaling up is there's a certain level to that you reach, and anything you go beyond that, you may run the risk of collapsing every single thing else that you've already developed. So you need to know where those points are. So in this, I feel like that we need to be concerned about, or I won't say concern, but it is a concern. I'll just leave it at that. So we need to be concerned about what journey a person is wanting to go on when they come into Sovereignty Mentorship. And so I've categorized those journeys into 4 elements. The first element is air. So I'm going from, let's say in this case, the top down. I call this the personal path of ascension. Give me one quick second because I would rather have my chart, because my chart is going to let me flow through this a lot faster, even though it has not been filled in inside of the software. It has been filled in inside of my brain. So I kind of know what I'm looking at, and I'd rather go through this reference. So let me just go ahead and boot up my chart real quick here. I think, wow, it should be right here. Maybe I didn't name it. Okay, great. So 4 bridges of sovereignty. Let me just get this into something that can be seen on the screen. And I'm going to go ahead and move myself out of the way for just this moment as I go through this. And then you can, if you've had any questions in your mind or concerns about even some of the things that you're seeing, maybe this answers your final questions for today. Okay, so this is called the 4 bridges to sovereignty. And I'm going to just blow up one of these because you can see that they're virtually the same. And these are going to be areas that I'm going to be building in or adding to over the next few weeks until I can get this thing done, but it is blinking as the priority. But also you understand that I'm a very visual person because I also believe that most of the time when I'm developing something, it has to be passed to someone else or entered into something. So I have a tendency to put it into something that allows me that in the end of the day, when I've done all the work, that I probably can just copy paste. And if I wanted to look at it like an overview or a journey, I can also see it that way. So that way also, if I'm trying to teach it to somebody or show them too, then they have something that'll allow them to understand it, right? Okay, so we're going to start here just in the chart, but I'm going to go through the elements, and I'm just going to show this because it's graphically nicer. Okay, so air in our world, so we're talking about in our world, what are the 4 elements like inside of sovereignty mentorship, and how can we work in those spaces respectively and build with that energy? And so I see an air as a person that, and I've given it even a smaller summary, I say the internal adept self-development, okay? And what we're talking about is we're talking about this is the personal path to ascension. This person really does not have this need to address their external lifestyle and others. So their external lifestyle and others is not really a major focus for them as far as what they're looking for in sovereignty mentorship. I guess I can put this here. I think maybe this will be better because you're at least following along with the text. So we're saying the air path is that person that they're like, you know what, I've been reading Adept knowledge for X amount of years. I hear that you definitely got something that I haven't really heard of before. I just want to work on that. I'm not really trying to link in with everybody, get with the tribe and all that kind of stuff. So we have beings that come through the space like that. And while that may be directly opposed to that heartfelt other being that's just trying to kumbaya and unite with everyone, we have to recognize there's some that are coming in and they're like, I need the algorithm of metaphysics. Where is it at? So in the air path, that's air to me because often birds fly alone. You know, there are the birds that are in the flock, but the eagles, they be way up there. And it's that airy type of thing where you're not clinging to anything. You see what I mean? So there's that being. Then we have fire, right? We move right into the fire. And to me, this is in the short context, we call this, they're objective driven and they need tangible results. This is blinking red for them. They kind of crash into the whole thing and they either need some type of financial growth to happen right away. They need some kind of body stimulation, meaning they need to lose weight or get in shape or detox or something like that. And what they're looking for within that attention span that they have is they need tangible results. So they need to dive right into something that's going to give them the tangible results in these respective categories because there's not much out of these respective categories. So to me, that's the fire energy because it needs this tangible result. It needs to happen. And they don't have a lot of time to spend on determining whether or not this is a place where they can get these things going on for them because they're looking to confirm things. So for them, seeing themselves lose weight, seeing themselves make more money means I'm in the right place. Now, remember, these are bridges to something. So that's just has to be a side note in your mind because you may see some start off like this, but not end up like this. They'll start off with these initial things that they want to get accomplished. And then as they grow through that, they'll realize and expand more into their uniqueness, right? So then we have also Earth. From time to time, we have members that drop in, and whether it was like a YouTube video that they saw, I don't know, they could have saw like my video today of a seahorse birthing more seahorses, right? And they said, wow, what did that come from? They subscribe, they click on the link in the description. Somehow they're in sovereignty mentorship. And they have no clue from the whole process how they got here. And they're just like, I like this. What is this? And so that to me is Earth. It's an initiatory grounding and balancing space. So it's a place to begin. It's the basic principles to enhancing self to really cover that person that's coming in that may have just, they felt the vibe, but they may not even know what the vibe actually is, right? I also say peeking ahead into self and seeing if this is something that they would be worthwhile because the attention span of these people when they come into the space, imagine if they come right into the thread and the thread is talking about something that just totally throws them in the left field. So this is, again, why we want to have these bridges so when there's an onboarding process of someone coming in, it begins to address right away what they're looking for. So we have finally the water, right? And the water in this case is becoming proficient and flexible in communication and relationships. These are the ones that we see right away that they have something that is saying that they need to be communicating with others. Notice how this is opposite to how air functions. Air is communicating with self. This is a person that they're aspiring even to do something like this and what I'm doing and working with others and talking to others. But that needs to be cultivated, right? Like I've had to cultivate this over 12 years, over a lifetime. So in this respect, though, you can recognize and you can see that. And then you want to give the person the right level of nurturing to be able to go into completely their role of leadership and the right instruction. So now watch how then this is going to become different in each group, because first I was thinking, okay, so maybe we'll set up some courses around it. We'll set up some books around it. We'll talk about some movies about it, and we'll set some actionables. And, I almost got a little woozy because after I thought about how I had to do that 900 times in etiology, even with getting help, I was, even though it's 4 of these, I was still like, man, it seems like we would kind of be going in the same pattern a little bit. Can we mix this up a little bit more and make it more advanced? And as I looked at it and dove into it a little bit deeper, it clicked. And so it clicks in a way, and we'll start from water, that we have obviously soul coaching happening. And the goal of soul coaching is actually to have more soul coaches. And we have soul coaches that are proficient in what they do, being themselves. So it's not something specific that you need to graduate from, like nutrition. It's people find you for what you do. And so we know now that it's working, and we've never announced it. We're getting others coming in, getting soul coaches, and we've got the back end looking decent enough for the person to communicate and do what they need to do. So now we need to create the ground for someone that wants to become a soul coach to become a soul coach. And that's what the water is. It's like your own baptism into greatness. You learn communication, you learn what the flow is of connecting with others. This is the groundwork for that. That's what's done there. We have what's called earth. Okay, well, we know earth, right? So this is, since we talked about, we talked about earlier how this is basically the quick start area. We don't have all day to baby you and try to get you to understand what consciousness is, but we can get you to exactly what it is. So what it brought me to is the awareness that we've already done that, though. We did that with etiology phase 1 and phase 2. The only gap is that there's not a lot of accountability. So in the Earth tribe, if you may, they study and break down together the etiology deployments. So a new person comes in, I don't know what's going on, they just sign up for the site. The deployment of their etiology path is already coming to them, and it's just in the Earth tribe, when they become a part of sovereignty mentorship, they have the accountability, which is done within the group, to progress through the things that are actually being deployed within that. So that's what goes on in that space, okay? And then we have in this area of what I call the tangible results, that's where we spend the time and the energy, because all of these have courses associated with them, which come from our existing materials. But in this one specifically, we would spend a bit more time getting movies and books or documentaries and actionables together respectively. The same thing would happen also in air, but we have materials already. These materials just need to be organized for proficiency. So the future of this and how it looks in conclusion is, and this is for existing members, of course, and new ones coming in, that we transition from this one-size-fits-all lounge. It's not going to happen right away, but the lounge is going to become what we call the heart. So it's the 5th element. And in order to get into the heart, you needed to go through the path or the bridge of what you initially came in before. That way you don't kind of get distracted by the next tribe vibes or the next person's post or whatever is going on, which would only decrease the time, or actually would increase the time frame in which you would need to succeed, that it would take you to succeed. So also, I feel like that right now, people feel, if you know you have something to work to, and you know that there is a space where there's a greater refinement, it's almost like a leveling up. And instead of that being seen as like a clique, like, oh, they all up there, because that's not what we're doing. We're all in the other spaces and in the tribe. It also becomes an honor to finally complete something that you set out to do in life, and then come into this heart space where you can get synchronicity really happening. Because once you get what you need out of the way, your own objective of what you thought you wanted, that's when you would be more comfortable with working with others and seeing how synchronicity flows and beginning to co-create. Not before then. Before then, it's either going to serve as one, a distraction, or a turn off. And what that means for us is that we're not doing what we set out to do as efficiently as we would like to do it. So these 4 passes you see, this is not difficult for us to begin to implement. We are going to remove some of the more distracting elements inside of the Geneva. So we won't have, there's extra chat, there's a room, there's all. We won't be needing those things because we'll actually have some very integrated, from polls to actionables to subject matter, that based on that tribe, each person will be able to engage in. And then we will universally also enforce a rule of you only join one tribe at a time. So we don't see you in air tribe, fire tribe, trying to handle everything, because we've already learned that that does not work. It's like you're trying to activate all the elements at the same time. So we have this thing that it's also not overlapping with soul coaching, because soul coaching is very integral and very, not integral, but very engaged with the person. This is more like community engagement, where we all work together in order to keep everyone on track. So that way it doesn't feel like somebody has inherited this role of master overseer and it's new moon, so they're about to leverage something down on your head, just because they're not feeling well today. It's a collective way of us all building each other. So that's what I have for today. It's 9:18, so it looks like you may still make it tonight, and you may still be able to get to whatever you're going to be getting into this evening without it being too late. I also wanted to let everybody know here that wow, this time in life has really it's really requiring me to, despite there may not be anything that has changed so drastically around me, like that I can denote that that's where the energy is coming from, it's challenging me to create that energy, to come back in on self, to revitalize self again, even though you may not see anything around you that may necessarily be motivating you to do that. And to just dial that in and to catch that wind and actually realize that that's how you broke the laws of thermodynamics and moved into a perpetual force that allows you to be able to have the wind that it takes to accomplish the things that you want to accomplish in life. And also, we're in a great space. We have something that we're creating, but it is in itself something that we are working on all the time. It is the balance. We are the bridge. So the more that, because we have these visualizations are very accurate. So the more that we build in the patterns of these visualizations, and we can see why we're doing this. Like, we will want a better onboarding because then you get what you want. And after you get what you want, then you can actually start realizing what you need. And then when you're in that space and in that form of connection, since you already have your thing taken care of, you're now really ready for a communication that is not you just trying to talk or you not listening to what the last person said. Such as, when our brother said, hey, I'm recovering. A sister said, hey, I feel you. I'm sending out this balanced vibration to help you with your recovery, because she caught that. She was listening. So that's the state that is going to allow us to continuously reign supreme over our consciousness and be lords of our own lives, masters of our own destiny. So I just wanted to say wholeness and balanced vibration. I'm going to keep going. Expect to see more from me. If you've already been seeing, I've been trickling out some more content into different networks. I've been challenging myself because we have so much here, but it's always a theme and a story that has to be created in order for others to really understand the space that they can enjoy. And you throw yourself into that, and then the more and more you become refined at it, the greater things will be created. And lastly, always remember that despite what you're seeing going on around here, that the forces that keep up the greatest levels of distortion are blind. And they're playing right into the hands of your adjustment to the algorithm to ensure that you don't go through any experiences of things that you don't want. You only need to do this one time. As Delbert Blair used to say, he's like, these are the kind of things that you need to do one time. And then after that, why you're not going to be getting into that and doing that again. And that's adepthood. That's our protection. That's our knowledge. So I'm going to let it ride from here. I'm going to open up the mics. It's 9:30. It feels like a breeze. And I just wanted to give thanks to this tribe, wholeness. Let me go ahead and set this thing. Yeah, there we are. Oh, I got one. Hold on, wholeness. There it is. Okay, so the lines are open. I do got one, though. I do got one.
Yes.
Wholeness.
Wholeness.
Wholeness, family.
Wholeness, fam.
Wholeness, family.
Wholeness.
Wholeness, family.
Wholeness and balanced vibration.
Wholeness and balanced vibration.
Drop that balance beat.
All right, here we go. Here it is.
Come to us young people.
Let's hear that beat.
Hold on. Here it is. Okay, let me meet the lines one more time. We go in. Hold on.
Wholeness.
All right, here we go.
You all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams.
All right. Here we go.
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own.
Well, then why can't we see it?
We have here nitric acid, glycerine, and a special mixture of my own. Together, it's horrible, dangerous stuff blows you up. But mixed together in the right way, as only I know how, what do you think it makes?
I don't know, sir.
You don't know. You don't know because only I know. If you knew and I didn't know, then you'd be teaching me instead of me teaching you. And for a student to teach his teacher, it's presumptuous and rude. Do I make myself clear?
Yes, sir.
Good.
Time changes space. Look, this flat ground we're standing on could have been at the bottom of the sea a million years ago. And a million years from now, it could be the interior of a huge mountain. Well, then why can't we see it?
Our purpose to create a star within a star.
All right, there we go. Woo! Let me hit these lines again. Wholeness and balanced vibrations, family. Thank you so much for being in the space. Until we meet again, I'll see you on the other side of things. And I definitely enjoyed today's build. Thank you so much. Wholeness.
Wholeness.
Wholeness tribe.
Wholeness.
Balance vibration, guys.
Wholeness and balanced vibrations. Wholeness, fam.
Wholeness.